I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 91 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Before I begin, I would just like to wish everyone a happy Sikh Heritage Month and Vaisakhi Dia Lakh Lakh Vadaiyan. That's just giving Vaisakhi wishes to everybody here in Canada and around the world. Pursuant to the order of reference of Tuesday, October 17th, 2023, and the adopted motion of Wednesday, December 13th, 2023, the committee is resuming consideration of Bill C-49, an act to amend the Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador Atlantic Accord Implementation Act and the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Resources Accord Implementation Act, and to make consequential amendments to other acts. Since today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of members and witnesses. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Although this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, feedback events can occur. These can be extremely harmful to interpreters and cause serious injuries. The most common cause of sound feedback is worn too close to a microphone. We therefore ask all participants to exercise a high degree of caution when handling the earpieces, especially when your microphone or your neighbor's microphone is turned on. In order to prevent incidents and safeguard the hearing health of interpreters, I invite participants to ensure that they speak into the microphone into which is plugged in, and to avoid manipulating the earbuds by placing them on the table, away from the microphone when they are not in use. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Additionally, screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. In accordance with our routine motion, I am informing the committee that all remote participants have completed the required connection tests in advance of this meeting. I would like to provide members of the committee.
Your screen is off, so we need to just suspend for technical reasons.
Okay, we will suspend for a few moments for technical reasons. I would like to provide members of the committee with some instructions and a few comments on how the committee will continue to proceed with the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-49. As the name indicates, this is an examination of all the clauses in the order in which they appear in the bill. I will call each clause successively, and each clause is subject to debate and vote. If there are amendments to the clause in question, I will recognize the member proposing it who may explain it. The amendment will then be open for debate. When no further members wish to intervene, the amendment will be voted on. Amendments will be considered in the order in which they appear in the bill or in the package each member received from the clerk. Members should note that amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk of the committee. The chair will go slowly to allow all members to follow the proceedings properly. Amendments have been given a number in the top right corner to indicate which party submitted them. There is no need for a seconder to move an amendment. Once moved, you will need unanimous consent to withdraw it. During debate on an amendment, members are permitted to move sub-amendments. These sub-amendments must be submitted in writing. They do not require the approval of the mover of the amendment. Only one sub-amendment may be considered at a time, and the sub-amendment cannot be amended. When a sub-amendment is moved to an amendment, it is voted on first. Then another sub-amendment may be moved, or the committee may consider the main amendment and vote on it. Once every clause has been voted on, the committee will vote on the title and the bill itself. And in order to reprint the bill may be required if amendments are adopted so that the House has a proper copy for use at a report stage. Finally, the committee will have to order the chair to report the bill to the House. That report contains only the text of any amendments as well as any indication of any deleted clauses. With us today to answer your questions, Department of Justice, Jean-Nicolas Boustros, Counsel. Also, Jean-François Roman, Legal Counsel. From the Department of Natural Resources, Abigail Lixfeld, Senior Director, Renewable and Electrical Energy Division, Energy Systems Sector. Also, Lauren Knowles, Deputy Director. And by video conference, Cheryl McNeil, Deputy Director, as well as the legislative clerks from the House of Commons, Dancela Boyi and Emilie Thivierge. Okay, at the last meeting, the committee had agreed by unanimous consent to stand Clause 147 and also to reconsider and stand Clause 38. Therefore, Clauses 147 and 38 will be considered after all other clauses of the bill have been disposed of. Okay, there are no amendments submitted to clauses 148 to 155. Do we have unanimous consent to group them for the vote?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
40, which one, sorry?
148 to 155. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Okay. Shall clauses 148 to 155 carry?
Yes.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Alday,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sabara,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
Nope.
Mr. Pratzer,
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
That's 8 yeas, 9 yeas, 2 nays.
Clauses 148 to 155 carry. We'll now proceed to clause 156, G16. Mr. Bruson, go ahead.
This is similar to G2, which was previously carried, and we need to be keeping consistency between the Newfoundland and Nova Scotia versions of this bill. So I support that we vote in favor of it. Just as a reminder of what it's about, is it's part of a group of amendments that would allow for a separate coming into force of certain clauses in the bill that pertain to the Impact Assessment Act.
Thank you, Mr. Bruson. Any other debate? No debate. Shall clause 16 carry?
Yes.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Alday,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sabara,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
yes.
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
Yep.
Mr. Pratzer,
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard, Mr. Angus.
Yes.
11 yeas, no nays.
G16 carries. Shall clause 156 as amended carry?
Yes.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Alday,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sabara,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
Yes.
Mr. Pratzer,
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
10 yeas, 1 nay.
Clause 156 carries as amended. There are no amendments submitted to clauses 157 to 168. Do we have unanimous consent to group them for the vote? Yes? Please call the roll, please, for clauses 157 to to 168.
Mr. Aldag,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbara,
Yes.
Mr. Dreesen,
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
Yep.
Mr. Patzer,
Yep.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
10 yeas, 1 nay.
Clauses 157 to 168 carry. Clause 169, BQ 30. Monsieur Simard, would you like to move that?
Comme je vous l'ai dit.
As I said at our last meeting, as my amendments were defeated in the first portion of the bill, I won't introduce the others that have to do with both bills. I won't move the other amendments.
Okay, so we will proceed to the next. Okay. Shall clause 169 carry? Please call the roll.
Mr. Aldag,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbara,
Yes.
Mr. Dreesen,
No.
Mr. Falk,
No.
Mr. Patzer,
Nope.
Ms. Stubbs,
No.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
Clause 169 carries. Clause 170. For the consideration of Clause 170, members of the committee will have noted on the agenda that the amendments creating new clauses 170.1 and 170.2 come in the middle of amendments for Clause 170. That is because the committee must study the proposed amendments in the order in which they appear in the bill. The amendments creating new clauses 170.1 and 170.2 will therefore be moved and voted on during the study of Clause 170. At the end, once all the amendments on Clause 170 are disposed of, the committee will vote on Clause 170 as amended or not. If amendments to create new clauses 170.1 and 170.2 are adopted, they will be reflected in the reprint of the bill that will be produced for the use at report stage. For G17, Mr. Bruson, go ahead.
So, as I had mentioned with the last one, this is to maintain consistency between the two bills, Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador and Nova Scotia. It's similar to G3 that have been previously carried, and it is again part of a group of amendments that would have a separate coming into force pertaining to the Impact Assessment Act.
Any further debate? No? Okay. Oh, yes, Ms. Stubbs, go ahead.
We will, we're going to vote against this clause and the amendments, but just take the opportunity to, again, impress upon Canadians and all elected members of this committee that it behooves the government to fix their catastrophic unconstitutional Bill C-69, which should have been done even before members are in the position to try to assess C-49 adequately, given how many clauses from C-69 that are also designated by the Supreme Court of Canada for being unconstitutional are in Bill C-49. That's a responsibility and an error on behalf of the Anti-Energy NDP Liberal Costa Coalition, and so Conservatives will vote against that for these reasons, and it's the government's job to fix the mess they made.
Thank you, Ms. Stubbs. Okay, so we'll now go to a vote on G17. Shall G17 carry? Yes. Please call the roll.
Mr. Aldag,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbara,
Oui.
Mr. Dreesen,
No.
Mr. Falk,
Nope.
Mr. Patzer,
Nope.
Ms. Stubbs,
No.
Mr. Simard,
Oui.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
G17 carries. We'll now proceed to new clause 170.1 G18. Mr. Rusin, go ahead.
This is same as what I've said on the previous amendments today. It's similar to G7, and it would ensure consistency between the Newfoundland and Labrador and Nova Scotia versions of the bill.
Any further debate? No? Please call the roll.
Mr. Aldag,
Yes.
Mr. Brusin,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
We.
Mr. Sorbara,
We.
Mr. Dreeshen,
No.
Mr. Falk.
Nope.
Mr. Patzer,
Nope.
Ms. Stubbs,
No.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
G18 carries as amended. Oh, sorry. G18 carries. Clause 170, CPC 13. Is there a member who would like to move it? CPC 13?
Yeah, I got it.
Mr. Patzer, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is a pretty straightforward and simple one. It's that Bill C-49 in Clause 170 be amended by deleting line 23 on page 119 to line 12 on page 120. There's obviously the longstanding position of the Conservative Party that the reference to the unconstitutional Implementation Act C-69 from the previous Parliament is problematic, and that it needs to be addressed and it needs to be dealt with, and the fact that it hasn't been dealt with is problematic and will create and cause more uncertainty for people looking to build projects in this country. So the fact that that has not been done and fixed yet leaves, I really think, this committee no choice but to delete it, because at this point we need to be passing bills and laws that are constitutional and wouldn't be deemed to be largely unconstitutional, as Bill C-69 was. So I think that today the committee could do the right thing by deleting this portion, so that way we can provide some certainty and clarity going forward, and so that way there's, the provinces and investors have a chance to do what's right. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Jones, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We oppose this particular motion. It's similar to the Conservative 8 motion, which was previously defeated, and we want to ensure consistency between both acts in Newfoundland, Labrador, and in Nova Scotia, and it's not something the provinces supported. They're opposed as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Oh, Mr. Dreeshen, go ahead.
Well, thank you. And I had brought this up earlier, and of course, with the folks from the Justice Department here today. My question to them is if we could have some clarification. That's right. Once there is a legislation that is deemed unconstitutional, and it then becomes embedded in future legislation, what recourse does the government have in the way if C-49 then is also considered to be unconstitutional? Do we have to go back to the very beginning and deal with this legislation prior to dealing with the unconstitutionality of the previous C-69?
I'd like to thank the member for their question. So as you're aware, a group of motions have been brought forward that would provide for a separate coming into force of certain clauses in Bill C-49 to allow for consistency across the statutes, as the government intended or intends to bring forward changes to the Impact Assessment Act at the earliest opportunity this spring. This is gives us the flexibility to ensure that if amendments to the IAA require amendments to C-49, that we have the ability to bring those forward and ensure alignment across the statutes. And that's what I can offer as a
Mr. Boustrous, being from the Justice Department, I suppose perhaps I should have directed it specifically there, because I understand what you can do within the legislation and the thoughts, but I'm talking about unconstitutionality. Does that then make C-49, if we are addressing that, if we cannot come to any agreement, as has been suggested by departmental officials, if we can't come to any agreement there, what does one have to do to C-49 if this unconstitutional aspect of C-69 continues to work its way into it? So the conflict that occurs with C-49. What remedies does the Justice Department see in this situation?
Can I take just a moment?
Sure.
I think that'd be a straightforward. So, Boustros and Yeoman are justice, and Westfield and Knowles are.
Sorry for that. So the intent of these provisions is really to coordinate, as was mentioned before, to make sure that when the Impact Assessment Act amendments come into force, that they'll work with what is found in C-49. When Parliament adopts a provision, the expectation is that it's going to be constitutional. But in this case, there is no, the only intent in this case is for both pieces of legislation to work together. It's not something which is related to the Impact Assessment Act in this case, in this bill.
Okay, so with this bill, the government is saying that we will come up with a solution to solve that. I'm just wondering what type of a solution a future government is going to have to do in order to blend those two things together. But I leave it at that. Thank you.
Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Patzer.
Yeah, thanks. I was just waiting for the mic to turn on there. I guess just kind of building off of what my colleague has said, throughout our study of the bill, there was at least 35 portions of the bill that directly reference or quote the Impact Assessment Act, but particularly the parts of it that were deemed largely unconstitutional. So I think that's the basis for the concern that we have here, is that the bill does reference those parts that are unconstitutional. So just building off of that part, you know, is it right for us to proceed when we are basically giving validity? This bill will just give validity to something that is unconstitutional, but it'll still be unconstitutional, right? So is it not going to run the risk then of running the same fate as C-69, the previous, from previous Parliament, the Impact Assessment Act, being in front of the courts, again, being referenced as largely unconstitutional and providing issues for investors, for the provinces who are looking to develop their resources. Our job is to be certain and clear, and again, this bill quotes unconstitutional parts of an act. So how are we supposed to proceed with confidence in that? I know you're not supposed to give us advice on that, but I'm just saying, like, I think you understand what I'm trying to say here, though, correct? About that. Like, well, how can we proceed with a bill that is unconstitutional? Does that not create problems?
I'd like to thank the member for the question, and perhaps my justice colleague will have some additional insight to provide, but I would just like to say that it's important to remember what these amendments actually do, and what they do is codify in the Accord Acts what the regulator will do during an impact assessment process. So it's about the ability to collaborate with the impact assessment agency on the impact assessment of a designated offshore project. And this is something that is of keen interest to us, but also the provinces, and we have worked really hard to make sure that these amendments respect joint management by having a role for the offshore board and how they will provide advice to the agency at steps of the impact assessment process without altering in any way that act. So as amendments come forward to that act, if there was any misalignment, then the separate coming into force provisions that we have brought forward or that have been brought forward through the motions would allow for us to continue to work with our provincial colleagues to ensure consistency across the statutes in a way that achieves the intent of these amendments, which is to clarify the role of the regulator in that process and to respect joint management.
Yeah, it's the alignment between the two provisions is we don't have a problem with that. We understand the need for that, right? Fully get that, fully respect that. But it's the unconstitutionality of the Impact Assessment Act in and of itself that's embedded in this. That's where the issue lies, right? It's not. We're not opposed to making sure that things align. I mean, that is our job as legislators to make sure that we pass good laws. So making sure that we have a bill that is in alignment the way it should be. We should do that here, and that's what this amendment generally does. But the rest of the clause, and there's a few more clauses after it, are directly related to and tied to the Impact Assessment Act, the parts of it in particular that were ruled as largely unconstitutional. So how can we proceed with a piece that references an unconstitutional document? Because basically what we're doing is we're making sure that both parts of the accord are unconstitutional now too, by mirroring it. That's basically what's happening. So that's where our concern lies. So when it comes to from the Justice Department side, how can we how can we proceed with that? I don't know how we can proceed without that. I mean, unless people around this table know the exact date when the government is going to be fixing the Impact Assessment Act, maybe the government knows that, and it would be beneficial if they could tell us that. Maybe the department people know that. If you do, it'd be beneficial to this committee, but also to Canadians and investors to know when that certainty and that regulatory provision is going to come, because it's needed. And that was the whole point of the reference case, because no government in Canadian history has ignored a reference ruling by the Supreme Court. So that's the foundational argument we're trying to make here as to why are we proceeding with something that is unconstitutional. But, I mean, again, if somebody wants to let the cat out of the bag here and tell us when it's going to happen, I mean, that would help. Then we could go along with it, because then we would know. But to just say the coming in effect date is going to be later, but we still don't know when the Impact Assessment Act is going to be fixed, that does nothing for us. So I hope you can appreciate the pickle that we seem to be in here on this.
I can't answer, I'm not in a position to answer the question specifically there that you're asking, but I can say that in discussions with our provincial colleagues, they were supportive of maintaining these provisions in the Act as they currently are written, and they were supportive of the motions to allow for a separate coming into force to ensure alignment across the statutes. And the timeline for, as you mentioned, bringing those into force would be dependent on a number of factors. There is no specific date, but that is to allow for consultation with our provincial partners who have to mirror these amendments in the provincial versions of the Accord Acts as well in order for them to come into force.
Yeah, Then why are we rushing it then?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Patzer. I have Mr. Falk. Mr. Falk,
Thank you,
go ahead.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, and thank you. And, you know, I've got the same questions swirling around in my head. Why are we moving forward on this when we're referencing a piece of legislation that, in fact, may not even exist anymore because it's been ruled unconstitutional? Like, that's what we're being asked to do here. And can you actually, it doesn't matter whether other jurisdictions are asking us to do it. If it's unconstitutional, it's unconstitutional. And I just don't understand why everybody seems to be okay with this Bill C-49 referencing Bill C-69, which we know is largely deemed unconstitutional. Like, it just doesn't make any sense why we wouldn't fix that first before we move ahead, or delete the references, which is what this amendment is doing. Delete the references to something that the Supreme Court of Canada has decided is not constitutional. Why would we reference a document that's no good?
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Do we have any? Oh, do you like? Okay, were you addressing a question to
I did ask
anybody?
a question. Why are we doing this?
Mr.
So, go ahead, Mr. Bruson, on your point of order.
The people sitting at this table who are sharing their knowledge with us are public servants, and I mean, they've been answering this question, I think, now several times in different formats, but at one point, they may be limited in exactly what they're able to answer given their role as part of the public service.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Bruson, on your point of order. Ms. Stubbs, go ahead on a point of order,
Well, I would
or
just-
on a debate.
Yeah, no,
Debate?
just on this debate, I'll just respond to MP DeBrusen. I guess since you're the Parliamentary Secretary for Natural Resources, then you could answer that question. Certainly, I would agree that the public servants trying to do the best that they can in their roles with their expertise, fixing bills that your government has made a mess of, and helping you justify the amendments that you have brought forward to fix this flawed bill in the first place, and now helping you try to justify passing a law.
Mr. Chair, I do believe that we
I'm
are
sorry, I
supposed to be
wasn't done
speaking
yet.
through the
That you
chair
were
rather
on this
than
talking
speaking
at the
Ms.
same
through
time.
Stubbs,
you, and I don't think
Ms.
this is
Actually, I wasn't done
DeBruson,
my
I'll ask
point.
everybody to hold for 1 sec. Ms. Stubbs, I'll ask you to hold because Mr. Bruson has a point of order. So on the point of order, Mr. Bruson.
Mr. Chair, it's not, we're supposed to speak through the chair rather than to say you,
Point of
you,
order,
and
Chair.
unless they are
Mr. Chair,
asserting
point
that
of
you,
order.
Mr. Chair,
So,
is doing all of
point
these
of
things.
order.
Thank you, Mr. Bruson, for your point of order. Mr. Patzer, you have a point of order.
Yes, I do. And my point of order is that she actually didn't even raise a point of order. She started talking over my colleague, and
No.
you granted as a point of order. So that actually is a problem. So we need
So-
to make sure that you do this properly.
Okay, colleagues, when a member says point of order, and I hear a member say point of order, I recognize the member, but as we've gone through this over several months previously, I do want members to be able to speak, but if there's a point of order, I want to allow that member to have their point of order brought forward. So now that it's been brought forward, Mr. Bruson had a point of order. You had a point of order, Mr. Patzer. I'm going to go back to Ms. Stubbs before I go to Mr. Angus and others who want to speak, because Mr. Angus also has his hand up. I did see you, Mr. Angus. Now I'll go back to Ms. Stubbs. Go ahead, Ms. Stubbs.
Thanks, Chair. And if it helps then to the Parliamentary Secretary for Natural Resources through you, Chair, I would suggest that she could perhaps enlighten this committee and all Canadians and investors and provinces and municipalities and Indigenous communities who have all challenged C-69, including senators, including every single premier and territorial leader who opposed it either outright or called for major overhauls. And moving forward, of course, to the Supreme Court decision that less than 6% of the bill is constitutional. The vast majority of it is largely unconstitutional, which was made in December. Many of those clauses explicitly declared as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court are in C-49. And if the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister is suggesting that these senior qualified experts in the public service who are trying to give them the elected members of the government the rationale to cover for their own mistakes, then perhaps she, as the parliamentary, I'm actually just making my comments in debate as I did when I started. Yeah, thanks, Vivian. Perhaps she could actually give the answers that all of us need to know about when the government actually will be bringing forward new legislation or amendments, I don't know how that works, to a law that's actually already a law and no longer an act and has been a law unconstitutionally for half a decade already under these NDP Liberals. I think it would behoove her to answer for clarity to the elected members here and all Canadians when those changes would be happening. And then I'll just reinforce the points that my colleagues are making, which is that it is ridiculous that we are being asked to pass this legislation brought forward by the NDP Liberals when we made the proposal in December that they could take the time to get C-69 fixed first, then we would move to C-50, or then we would move to C-49, then we would move to C-50 after that. But here we are in April, the government is in April, the government is saying they're still promising legislation. That hasn't happened. And the point of my colleagues are making is that obviously if this bill gets passed with those sections unresolved, it will come into force with a lack of certainty and a lack of clarity about its constitutionality, about legality, and automatically, obviously, invite legal challenges by the same groups or other groups involved in the challenges to C-69 all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada. So, kudos to the public servants for doing their jobs. This actually isn't their mess to fix, but it certainly is the ministers. And since the parliamentary secretary is here and saying that the officials shouldn't answer any more of these questions, perhaps she can. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Stubbs. I'll now go to Mr. Angus. Mr. Angus, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. We always seem to have to start again with simplistic, simple explanations. Bill C-49 is updating the Atlantic Accord. The Atlantic Accord is a long-standing piece of legislation that was negotiated between Newfoundland and Labrador and the province of Nova Scotia. The Atlantic Accord has been undermined in the past, attempted to be undermined, and that was the previous Conservative government, and Pierre Poilievre was in that government at the attack on the Atlantic Accord. It didn't go well. So when we get letters from the premiers of Newfoundland and Labrador and Nova Scotia calling on the federal government to update the language on the Atlantic Accord so that we can move ahead with new employment opportunities and new energy projects, our responsibility is to make sure that that language is updated so it can do the job it has done. It has never been challenged as unconstitutional. It hasn't been opposed. So we keep going back to square one because the Conservatives want to fight about Bill C-69. My concern is the longer we delay, the more we're guaranteeing that workers in Newfoundland and Labrador and Nova Scotia are being undermined because the projects that are getting off the ground are going to jurisdictions where they have the certainty that legislation is actually going to be passed and not filibustered. So C-49 is constitutional. It has been constitutional. It has never been opposed. So I would hope that we can get this done so we can move on to other pressing matters.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. I'll now go to Mr. Patzer. Mr. Patzer, go ahead.
49 is a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Those same premiers have also written a letter to axe the carbon tax, but so we're still awaiting a government to do that too, maybe.
Yeah.
So, and I would appreciate that member's support in supporting the premiers on that one too. But the point. The point, Mr. Chair, of why we are here, and the reason what a lot of these amendments are doing is actually the amendments that the government's proposing are to delay the implementation of the act because they have to consult with the provinces because they didn't do their job yet.
And fix the impact assessment.
And they got to fix the Impact Assessment Act because it's been ruled largely unconstitutional. So that's the problem. So why not take this bill, make sure that there are no unconstitutional elements to it, make sure that we're passing something that will actually withstand the test and not have to go before the courts as from a previous parliament, Bill C-69, now known as the Impact Assessment Act, has done. It's had to go to the Supreme Court, where it was ruled unconstitutional. I don't think the provinces and the industry want this bill to suffer the same fate. We know that they want the updates to the Accord. We know that, and we get that. That's what we're here to do. We support that. What we don't support is passing an unconstitutional bill. That's why Conservatives are doing the work here and now at committee to prevent the same fate of C-69 being the same result for this bill we're working on here today, which is C-49, the Atlantic Accord Implementation Act. So we are trying to do the best that we can now, so that way there's certainty in the long run. So I understand that that might be hard for some members to get, but that is what the point of this exercise here today is to do, and that's to do our job as legislators.
Thank you. Mr. Bruson, go ahead.
Perhaps actually if I can ask the officials this question, because it might be helpful for the entire committee to hear this answer, is that CPC 8, which is a mirror to CPC 13, was voted down by this committee when we were discussing the previous bill and its application. So maybe if you can help us to understand the importance of ensuring consistency between the Newfoundland and Labrador and the Nova Scotia bills, and in whether it would be acceptable to have different clauses and different wording in the two bills.
So what I can tell you is that we have worked with our two provincial partners, both Newfoundland and Labrador and Nova Scotia, together to clarify in the two pieces of legislation what the role of the two regulators would be in the context of a federal-only impact assessment. So it's important to remember these are federal provincial regulators that operate in a joint management context on behalf of both governments, both levels of government. And there is a desire to ensure that both offshore areas provide the same opportunity and I guess framework, regulatory and legislative framework to ensure that companies that are coming into both the Canada, Newfoundland, Labrador offshore and the Canada, Nova Scotia offshore have the same sort of operating framework with which to expect. And so having one set of amendments in the Newfoundland Act that speak to the role of the regulator in participating in an impact assessment and the subsequent absence of similar amendments to the Canada-Nova Scotia version of the Accord Act would create uncertainty and inconsistency and a lack of clarity for industry, but it would also sort of strengthen joint management in one offshore jurisdiction and weaken it in another, which would not be supported by our provincial colleagues to have sort of an inconsistent approach where one regulator is given a certain treatment and the other regulator is not.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now go to Mr. Dreeshen. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your question, your answer, Ms. Knowles, on that. I'd like to ask you this question: were the provincial governments given a course of action if the regulatory framework related to C-69 is not corrected? So, in your discussions, were they given a course of action, expectations, how long it would take, or we might have to go back and correct this? Are they aware of it? Because we understand that they're supportive of the concept with the hope that C-69 is going to be dealt with. Were they given a course of action if that regulatory framework actually can't be corrected?
So, yes, I can answer. Thank you for your question. As you're aware, the federal government has to introduce and pass these amendments, and the provincial government must do the same to their versions of the Accord Acts, and the two must be brought into force at the same time to work together. And so the proposal to allow for a separate coming into force gives the flexibility to ensure consistency across the impact assessment and Accord Act statutes, and the course of action, if there was disagreement by the provincial colleagues to move forward with mirroring those amendments in their provincial version of the Accord Acts, would be to not bring them into force until such time as there was provincial concurrence. So that would be the course of action.
So could their legislation that they are putting forward then be jeopardized if we can't come to some sort of an agreement and relationship with C-69? Is the legislation then that they are presenting to their legislatures in jeopardy if C-69, if the aspects of C-69 that do relate to their bills can't be resolved?
I would say no, because they can still introduce and pass the same amendments that you see in the rest of Bill C-49, and they could take the same approach to introduce, if they wished, the same amendments related to impact assessment, and also provide for a separate coming into force of those amendments so that we could work in lockstep together. So no, I wouldn't see that any uncertainty on C-69 would prevent the rest of Bill C-49 from proceeding, or the provincial mirror amendments, because we have an administrative approach, to allow for the bill to proceed and to allow for those IAA amendments to come forward and ensure consistency without impacting the rest of the amendments in the bill.
So therefore, the fact that C-69, if it continues to be considered unconstitutional, then they aren't using some reference point from a federal piece of legislation that is going to somehow jeopardize the legislation that they put forward in their legislatures.
It would be up to the provinces to determine what they would introduce in their legislatures and when and the timing of that introduction, and that could include a delayed coming into force for those clauses related to the impact assessment.
And that was
clauses
the
we
course of
referenced.
action I was wondering whether or not you had spoken of. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've exhausted debate on CPC 13. So can we call the roll, please?
Mr. Elday.
No.
Mr. Bruson.
No.
Ms. Jones.
No.
Madame Lapointe.
Entre.
Mr. Sorbera.
No.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Yes.
Mr. Falk.
Yes.
Mr. Pratzer.
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs.
Yes.
Mr. Simard.
No.
Mr. Angus.
No.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
CPC 13 fails, does not carry. We'll now go to G19. Mr. Bruson, go ahead.
So this is similar to G9 that was previously carried by this committee. And as I've mentioned, it's important to ensure consistency between the Newfoundland and Labrador and Nova Scotia versions of this bill. It is to correct an inconsistency between the English and French text of the bill.
Yeah, I don't see any further debate. Please call the roll on G19.
Mr. Eldag.
Yes.
Mr. Bruson.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Madame Lapointe.
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera.
Oui.
Mr. Dreeshen.
No.
Mr. Falk.
No.
Mr. Pratzer.
Nope.
Ms. Stubbs.
No.
Mr. Simard.
Oui.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
G19 carries. G20, Mr. Bruson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one is similar to G10 that was previously carried by the committee. Again, consistency is important. This one makes a change to the French language. Ça remplace le mot et.
It replaces the word and with the word or.
Recommend we support this.
Okay, I don't see any further debate. Please call the roll on G20.
Mr. Eldag.
Yes.
Mr. Bruson.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Madame Lapointe.
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera.
Oui.
Mr. Dreeshen. Mr. Falk.
Nay.
Mr. Pratzer.
Nope.
Ms. Stubbs.
Nay.
Mr. Simard.
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
G20 carries. New clause 170.2. G21. Mr. Bruson.
So this is similar to G11 that had been previously carried by this committee. Again, consistency is important, and this is part of a group of amendments with a separate coming into force.
I don't see any further debate. Please call the roll.
Mr. Alday,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Oui.
Mr. Dreeshen,
No.
Mr. Falk,
Nay.
Mr. Patzer,
Nope.
Ms. Stubbs,
No.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
G22. G21 carries. We'll now go to G22. Mr. Bruson.
Alors, celui-ci, de nouveau,
So once again, this will just to amend an error in terms of the choice of words. And of course, we want both of the bills to be consistent. So we delete the word which or what and change it in that manner. And we already, in fact, supported this change earlier.
I don't see any further debate. Please call the roll.
Mr. Alday,
We.
Mr. Bruson,
yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Oui.
Mr. Dreeshen,
No.
Mr. Falk,
Count.
Mr. Patzer,
Nope.
Ms. Stubbs,
Nay.
Mr. Simard,
We.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
Okay. We'll now go to, that's G22 carries. We'll now go to, shall clause 170 carry as amended? Please call the roll.
Mr. Alday,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
No.
Mr. Falk,
No.
Mr. Patzer,
Nope.
Ms. Stubbs,
No.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
G70 carries as amended. There are no amendments submitted to clauses 171 to 184. Do we have unanimous consent to group them for the vote? Not yet? Not yet. Okay, so we'll go to the first one. Shall clause 171 carry?
Yes. Yes.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Alday,
Yes.
Mr. Prusen,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Oui.
Mr. Dreeshen,
No.
Mr. Falk,
No.
Mr. Patzer,
Nope.
Ms. Stubbs,
No.
Mrs. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
Clause 171 carries. Shall clause 172 carry? Please call the roll.
Mr. Alday,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Oui.
Mr. Dreeshen,
No.
Mr. Falk,
No.
Mr. Patzer,
No.
Ms. Stubbs,
No.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
Clause 172 carries. Shall clause 173 carry? Please call the roll.
Mr. Alday,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
171 to
Mr.
184.
Oui.
Mr. Dreeshen,
After all that.
Mr. Falk,
Yes.
Mr. Patzer,
Oh, yeah.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
So we've got 9 yeas, 2 nays. 170.
173 carries. 170, yes, we have Mr. Patzer.
There we go, just waiting for the microphone. Yeah, we'd be good to group, I think we're on 174 now, 174 up to
184?
184, yes.
Okay. So do we have unanimous consent to group 174 to 184? Yes, we do. Okay, thank you.
Agreed with us.
Shall clauses 174 to clause 184 carry? Please call the roll.
Mr. Elday? Yes. Mr. Bruson?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
We.
Mr. Chabert?
We.
Mr. Dreesen?
Yes.
Mr. Falk?
Yes.
Mr. Patzer?
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs?
Yes.
Mrs. Sima?
No.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
10 yeas, 1 nay.
Clauses 174 to 184 carry. Clause 185, G22.1. Mr. Bruson.
Again, maintaining consistency, but just to know, this amendment makes it clear that royalty owners are not party to a unit operating agreement and do not have to approve it. And the unit operating agreement is an agreement between the working interest owners and would not involve the royalty owners.
I don't see any further debate on clause 22.1. Shall clause 22.1 carry? Yes. Oh, just go ahead, Mr. Patzer. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, we were just kind of wondering if there would be just a further rationale as to why. Is there an example specifically to where this would play, where this would work? Like, what specific case would this be used in? I guess just for the sake of trying to make sure for absolute clarity on giving this type of approval to something. Yeah, or you, as you move the amendment. So I guess if you have an answer to, that's fine. But through you or through the chair to Ms. DeBruson, if she wants to answer, that's fine too. But I guess if the officials have an answer, I'm fine too. But I would think the parliamentary secretary would maybe have some comments on it. But
Thank you, Mr. Patzer. Do the officials or Mr. Bruson, would you like to add any
I know
further
that
clarity?
the provinces have supported it, and I think that the officials would be well placed to answer the question in more detail.
Thank you. Officials?
Cheryl McNeil online.
Cheryl, please go ahead.
Thank you. This would be in respect to where there would be pools, petroleum pools found that straddle different administrative boundaries. And so in that instance, the parties would work together to agree to a unit operating agreement. And the unit operating agreement deals kind of with property matters, so the unitization of rights and interests. And while the other deals with procedural matters, so how the working interest owners would make those operational decisions. So those would be the differences between the two.
Thank you. Mr. Dreesen?
Thank you. And then to Ms. McNeil, the transboundary pools, the assumption is that that is interprovincial, but are we dealing in any way, shape, or form? Do we have to deal with Canadian-U.S. boundary pools? Has that been taken into account in this particular discussion?
Thank you. Yes, so these amendments could work with respect to both domestic pools as well as those that would straddle international boundaries, such as Canada-U.S. Or Canada-France, for example, with the St. Pierre et Miquelon off the south coast of Newfoundland and Labrador.
So does this also deal with international waters then? That's a similar type of argument then that you would have there?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The nose of the Grand Banks.
Well, the nose of the Grand Banks, for example?
I don't know. I'm may need to get one of our legal counsel to step in here, but specifically, this is with respect to administrative boundaries, like it could be between, as you say, Canadian boundaries, like Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, France, Canada, US. I don't believe that it would extend beyond kind of the outer continental shelf, the extended shelf and into international waters.
Well, thank you, and perhaps some of the folks from Justice then could fill us in, as they would have some certainly input on international treaties and international waters.
Well, the specific clause is about the Canada-Nova Scotia Accord Act, so the Grand Banks is not concerned here. This is but because we are part of the Canada-Newfoundland-Labrador Accord area. So the scenario under the Canada-Nova Scotia Accord Act will be more likely where at the southern edge of the boundary with France or near the United States coast. But if it's with international waters, there's no other appropriate authority. The clause of UNCLOS says that it is the country that which continental shelf extends beyond the 200 nautical miles that will have authority. So it's not a transboundary pool in that case.
Okay, so there is a specific definition of a transboundary pool that you and as legal people and the department is satisfied with?
Yes.
Is that what I am to understand from that? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to Mr. Patzer.
Thank you. And just maybe the officials, if you could just help clarify another couple points for me here. And it says the regulator and the appropriate authority may approve the unit agreement, ... Just wondering, if we're dealing with interprovincial boundaries, would it then not include multiple authorities? Like, I'm just wondering, should that be a plural word, or just again, we have a regulator and you have an authority, but are there not multiple authorities? Because as I understand, there's a federal department, then there's also the two different provincial agreements here, right? So should that be a plural word? Because if it's interprovincial, would it not be both of them? And if it happens to be in, say, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick waters, then what?
Well, according to the Interpretation Act, when we use the singular in a statute, the plural is included as well. So that's not a concern.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then at the end of the amendment here, it says if all the working interest owners in the transboundary pool are parties to it, the working interest owners, would that be like a company that's looking to drill a well, or is that the provincial government? Is that the First Nations in the area? Like, who are we talking about when we say working interest owners? Like, just wondering if you could provide some certainty about, or some clarity, I guess, for my own knowledge here as to what that actually means.
I think this one I'll let Mrs. McNeil answer about these details.
The working interest owners would refer to the operators that would be exploiting the field, so whoever they might be.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further debate. Shall G22.1 carry? Yes. Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldag?
Yes.
Mr. Bruson?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
Oui.
Mr. Saber?
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen?
No.
Mr. Fogg?
No.
Mr. Patzer?
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs?
Yes.
Mrs. Simard?
No.
Mr. Angus?
Okay, we.
That's a yes. Okay. 8 yeas, 3 nays.
G22.1 carries. G23, Mr. Bruson.
This corrects a minor typo in the legislation, moving the word regulatory, replacing it with the word regulator.
Okay. I don't see any further debate. Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldag?
Yes.
Ms. DeBruson?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
Yes.
Mr. Patzer,
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
Oui.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
11 yeas, no nays.
G23 carries. We'll now go to shall clause 185 carry as amended. Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldag,
Yes.
Ms. DeBrussen,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Je pense oui.
Mr. Dreeshen,
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
Yes.
Mr. Patzer,
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
10 yeas, 1 nay.
Clause 185 carries as amended. There are no amendments submitted to clauses 186 to 209. Do we have unanimous consent to group them for the vote? Not yet. Okay, so we'll start with clause 186. Shall clause 186 carry? Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldag,
Yes.
Ms. DeBrussen,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
Yes.
Mr. Patzer,
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
10 yeas, 1 nay.
Clause 186 carries. Clause 187. Shall clause 187 carry? Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldag,
Yes.
Ms. DeBrussen,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
No.
Mr. Falk,
No.
Mr. Patzer,
Nope.
Ms. Stubbs,
No.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
Clause 187 carries. Shall clause 188 carry? Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldag,
Yes.
Ms. DeBrussen,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
No.
Mr. Falk,
No.
Mr. Patzer,
No.
Ms. Stubbs,
No.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
Clause 188 carries. Shall clause 189 carry? Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldag,
Yes.
Ms. DeBrussen,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
Yes.
Mr. Patzer,
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
10 yeas, 1 nay.
Clause 189 carries. Shall clause 190 carry? Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldag,
Yes.
Ms. DeBrussen,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sorbera,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
Yes.
Mr. Patzer,
Yep.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
10 yeas, 1 nay.
Clause 190 carries.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Mr. Patzer.
Yeah, sorry. I just have a quick question. You said previously that it was clause 2. At least I heard you say 209. Did you mean 219?
Sorry, 209.
209.
209. So we are now,
Yeah, because I don't have a amendment for 209.
hold on.
Unless I'm just missing something.
No,
but you don't either. So.
what did it, just one sec. The reason we stop at 209 because clause 210 starts part 3 of the bill. And so we will go to 209, then we will shift to part 3 of Bill C-49, and then we'll start again with the clauses with 210 and onwards. Does that make sense?
Yes, that
Okay.
that does.
Does
make
that clarify
sense.
for everybody around the table? Yeah?
Yeah, I think that I'm. Yeah, that's good for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would we like to would we like to carry with unanimous the grouping of 191 to 209? Mr. Patzer?
Yeah, that's to 209. That's fine.
Yeah, okay. So shall clause 191 to clause 209 carry?
Yes.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldig,
Yes.
Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sabara,
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen,
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
This
Yes.
might be the perfect time. to
Mr.
do it.
Pratzer,
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
10 yeas, 1 nay.
Clauses 191 to 209 carry. Now we will proceed to Part 3 of Bill C-49. There are no amendments submitted to clauses 210 to 219. Do we have unanimous consent to group them for the vote? Yes, okay. Shall clauses 210 to 219 carry? Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldig. Yes. Mr. Bruson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Sabara,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Dreeshen,
Yes.
Mr. Falk,
Yes.
Mr. Pratzer,
Yes.
Ms. Stubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Simard,
No.
Mr. Angus.
Yes.
10 yeas, 1 nay.
Clauses 210 to 219 carry.
Chair.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair.
Sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Stubbs.
Thank you. Just given the conversations we have been having about uncertainty and about energy, I would just like to move the motion that I submitted on Friday, April 5th, Chair. Just want to address the issue of LNG exports from Canada and talk a little bit about why committee members here at Natural Resources should support the motion to ask the Minister of Natural Resources to come to this committee to talk about Canada taking the moral, political, geopolitical, security, sovereignty, and energy and food poverty reasons that Canada should take the opportunity to be able to provide LNG around the world and with particular to Canada's allies. So the motion that I submitted on April 5th says, quote, given that the Prime Minister of Greece recently stated that Greece would, quote, of course, be interested in purchasing Canadian LNG, noting that Greece is, quote, a big entry point for LNG, not just for the Greek market, but also for the Balkans and for Eastern Europe, and that, as the Prime Minister of Greece said, that, quote, theoretically they could even supply Ukraine. The leaders of Germany and Japan have made similar remarks during their state visits to Canada in the past couple of months and couple of years. The Minister of Natural Resources recently stated in a CTV interview that, quote, we are not interested in investing in LNG facilities. That's the role of the private sector. They need to assess the business case and make the investments. Given that the private sector has assessed the business case for Canadian LNG positively and has repeatedly tried to invest in LNG development and export facilities in Canada, evidenced by the fact that there have been 18 proposals for LNG projects submitted to the federal government, and that despite this, the Liberal government has consistently delayed these LNG projects, and as a result, the only LNG project currently under construction in Canada is one that was approved by the previous Conservative government. That the committee, one, report its concern regarding this matter to the House of Commons, and two, invite the Minister of Natural Resources to testify before the committee regarding his comments for no less than 2 hours on or before April 18th, 2024. I just want to give some context for why to make the case for why elected members of the Natural Resources Committee should support this motion and invite the Minister to appear. First of all, of course, Conservatives agree in principle that what should happen is a government should set attractive fiscal, regulatory, and investment conditions so that private sector proponents can bring home big projects, jobs, and money to Canada while helping to expand and accelerate Canada's environmentally responsible oil and gas, other energies and other technologies, but in particular LNG in the near term to European allies. We Conservatives agree that that oil and gas projects and export projects and pipelines and energy infrastructure should not require taxpayer subsidies or dollars, and that, of course, this has been happening in recent years precisely because of the NDP Liberals' anti-energy red tape, gatekeeping, permitting timelines, uncertainty, and anti-energy messages and policies that have both driven investment in major energy projects out of Canada, primarily into the United States, and also, of course, therefore, have driven a brain drain Canadian jobs, money, and businesses into other jurisdictions as well. It should be noted, of course, that Greek Prime Minister was the first Greek leader to come to Canada in more than 40 years. So it is a big deal that here on this goodwill visit to discuss, quote unquote, shared interests with our Prime Minister of Canada, that he said in Canada and in the media that his country would like to start importing Canadian LNG, and that Canada would, he said, quote, absolutely be an ideal partner. Greece's Prime Minister said, made that point that Greece is a big entry point for LNG, for obviously the Greek market, but also for Eastern Europe in general. And he specifically commented on the fact that a supply of Canadian LNG could help support Ukraine in real ways as they fight Putin's illegal aggression and attack on them by breaking dependence on Putin's oil and gas in the region. And he told Canada and Canadians that Greece is putting the finishing touches on a major facility to start importing and processing LNG tankers. Of course, that Greek Prime Minister just follows in the footsteps of other Canadian allies and world leaders who have been asking for a supply of Canadian LNG, including the Japanese Prime Minister and the German Chancellor. And, of course, mind-bogglingly, the Prime Minister of Canada said that there was no business case for the development of Canadian LNG. So, first of all, he's apparently the only world leader and only guy in the entire discussion who thinks that there isn't a business case for Canadian LNG. But what, of course, is actually happening is death by delay, which is because this anti-energy government has increased permitting timelines, increased taxes, pancaked and layered these anti-energy policies and laws that deter investment and then jeopardize even approved projects from being able to get built. What has actually happened is that is the reality, which is that fiscal and regulatory conditions attracting projects of that size with that investment, with that risk, and with those job numbers, the regulatory and fiscal conditions passed by governments are inextricably linked and inherently embedded in the private sector's assessment of what is a good business case. The problem in Canada's scenario is our domestic government's anti-energy policies, red tape, and laws. The problem in Canada's scenario is a Prime Minister of Canada being the only person in the country saying that there's no case, being the only person in the country, and apparently also among world leaders, saying there's no business case for Canadian LNG. I think it's important to note, of course, that the requests for Canadian LNG have happened by more world leaders. For example, in June 2022, Ukraine's ambassador issued a call for Canadian oil and gas companies to help in the fight against Putin's attack by entering and expanding into the European market with LNG. She said at that time, quote, Canadian companies, we do think, should take the opportunity to enter and expand in the European Union market. And I'm sure, Chair, you also being from the province of Alberta, major natural gas area in this country, among many others, right across Canada, I'm sure that you would agree with the importance of expanding natural gas development and exporting LNG around the world. to help break dependency on despots and dictators with much lower environmental track records and almost no human and labor rights or standards to speak of. And of course, also in 2022, Latvia's ambassador made it known that they would welcome shipments of Canadian LNG to help Europe reduce its dependence on Russian gas. He said, quote, "We are trying to build a resilient energy system. If Canada is going to invest in LNG, we would wholeheartedly support it." But of course, the reality is that after 9 years, today, Canada still doesn't export any LNG, despite being the 5th largest natural gas producer in the world. And it is precisely because of the NDP Liberals' domestic anti-energy policies and red tape that's bad for Canada, but good for all of Canada's global competitors, good for the United States, our biggest energy competitor and customer, and good for the top 10 major oil and gas competitive regimes across the country, almost none of whom are democracies, almost all of whom are dictators and despots. Because the truth is, of course, that there have been 18 LNG proposals made in Canada, and under the last 8 to 9 years of these NDP Liberals, 0 of them are built. Only 3 have been approved, and only 1 is actually currently under construction, which of course was approved by the previous Conservative government, but then delayed by the Liberals after they formed government, after which they did give another green light. But that, of course, was a delay in itself. So the reality is that because of Prime Minister Trudeau's anti-energy messages about Canadian LNG, and because of the suite of anti-energy policies and laws passed by this government in the last 9 years, Canada has almost, the NDP Liberals have almost left Canada completely behind. We have almost missed entirely the opportunity, both our moral, our political, our security, our sovereignty, and our energy and food poverty reasons. Regardless, we have almost missed entirely the opportunity for Canada to participate in what is obviously a global role that is demanded by world leaders, including very significantly our allies around the world in various conflicts combating hostile regimes to Canada and to the free world. And of course, Warren Buffett, he canceled 50% of funding that he was prepared to invest in for the Saguenay LNG plant because of, quote, instability, quote, in the current Canadian political context. And he, of course, diplomatically means the anti-energy regulatory and various anti-energy policies and laws passed by this government. But what's important, I see the NDP Liberals sort of try to pretend that they're these external observers and like they have nothing to do with this. They like to blame global trends and things happening around the world to rationalize what are unique Canadian situations actually caused by their own policies and legislation. So to make that point, make sure that Canadians know, it's not just me saying it. Here's the contrast of what's happened with the United States on almost the exact same time frame, where 18 LNG proposals have been made to this government, but most have been mothballed or withdrawn by their private sector proponents because of these anti-energy NDP Liberals. In that same time frame, 7 LNG terminals have been constructed, not just approved, they've been constructed in the U.S. 20 more have been approved. And they're saying recently that 5 more will be open by 2028. So in that same time frame, the United States has become the world's leading LNG exporter. And their exports are expected to double by 2030. So what is wild about this is that then in January, the Biden administration announced that they would just do a pause on their permit approvals for LNG projects. But the reality is, of course, this is after they've already moved forward to ensure that the U.S. Dominates the global market, while our own Prime Minister, against the best interests of Canada and Canadians, have let Canada fall behind. And I think it is incomprehensible that instead of taking the opportunity for Canada to lead in North America, that the Natural Resources Minister praised the pause and then he did say that it would create an opportunity for Canada, except that, of course, the numbers show that it's his own government that has driven LNG exports, projects, jobs, and money out away from Canada, and almost lost that opportunity for all of us. So it behooves Canadians to ask, like, what are the consequences of all this? What does this actually mean? Well, this is what it means. It means that in the midst of a global energy and food poverty crisis, in the midst of a skyrocketing cost of living crisis in Canada, driven by inflationary deficit spending by the NDP Liberals that have also increased interest rates and are making life more and more unaffordable for Canadians, and of course, even despite the fact that European allies are begging Canada to help supply the energy needs for their citizens, for their countries, and to reduce dependence on despots and dictators, it is just mind-boggling that the Prime Minister continues to say that there isn't a business case for Canadian LNG, and the Natural Resources Minister has not bothered to take that opportunity, that window for Canada that they've almost already completely lost. It is also mind-boggling, of course, given the debate in Canada around support for Ukraine against Putin's illegal attack. There are lots of great words that come from the Liberals, and they have taken measures to support Ukraine. But it is blindingly and wildly obvious to me that the biggest ways to help support Ukraine, in addition to sending weapons, are, of course, just to send Canadian LNG and energy and other technologies to be able to break their dependence on Putin and Putin's energy control of the entire region. But of course, this government instead signed off on permits to actually send turbines to help Putin's own gas pipeline to fund his war. So let's talk about what else has happened since that. Well, this has happened. France has signed a 27-year agreement with Qatar for LNG. Germany has signed a 15-year deal with Qatar for LNG. Netherlands signed a 27-year deal with Qatar for LNG. China signed a 27-year deal with Qatar for LNG. India signed a 20-year deal with Qatar for LNG just last month. And you'll note a week ago, the Indian Prime Minister was talking about how they're ramping up coal, of course, and the benefit it will provide to many of their citizens who are also suffering food and energy poverty and live in places that are not as industrialized and don't yet get to live in the same standard of living and quality of life that many Canadians and people in North America get to enjoy. Japan is also currently in talks with Qatar to secure LNG imports from them after our Prime Minister turned them away. And I think Canadians should get to know that, of course, in the midst of all of this, Hamas, the leader of the terrorist organization wreaking havoc in Gaza and on Israel, lives in Qatar. So these are the real geopolitical, security, sovereignty consequences of this Prime Minister, his minister, and the NDP Liberal anti-energy costly coalition. It's clear that the world wants and needs more Canadian LNG, but what has happened after 9 years of this anti-energy government is that our allies are forced to sign deals with despots, with countries that are home to terrorist organization leaders. And the result is also that our biggest energy competitor, customer, and North American ally is outpacing Canada. Mexico was just announced a couple of months ago that they are also going to have a goal to ramp up their LNG development and export. So we may also this anti-energy NDP Liberal government and anti-energy Prime Minister apparently are going to be just fine with Mexico also outpacing Canada on the continent for LNG development and exports. It's absolutely mind-boggling, but just clear from a common sense conservative perspective that the reality of Prime Minister Trudeau's anti-energy policies and messages are that they actually enrich regimes that sponsor terrorism and and enrich regimes that are attacking allies, including the people of Ukraine, that these NDP Liberals like to talk about supporting. So to make clear, common sense Conservatives would expand and accelerate traditional oil and gas development in Canada. We would expand and accelerate LNG approvals and exports from Canada. We would ensure that private sector proponents have clarity, certainty, predictability, fairness, and the backing of a government to build their projects once approved after they've gone through Canada's expert and unparalleled regulatory assessment regime. And so for these reasons, I do hope that the elected members from all parts of this country on the Natural Resources Committee will support this motion to discuss this issue in further depth, and also invite the Minister of Natural Resources to be present at the committee to join this discussion. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Stubbs, for presenting your motion. I have a speaking list established. I'll go to Ms. Jones, and then I'll go to other speakers after Ms. Jones. Ms. Jones? Ms. Jones, go ahead. I have Jeremy, I have Ms. Jones, and I have you, Mr. Patzer, and then I have Mr. Cerbera, and then I have Mr. Small.
No. Point of order.
So I will go to you, Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate that. And I just want to say that we have been very active on the agenda of moving forward on energy projects in Canada. We have launched more investment in clean energy initiatives than any other government in our history. We're helping communities right across Canada be able to transition from diesel generation to clean energy technologies and alternatives, and we're continuing to do that. What we've also found in this case is a huge reception by companies, especially companies that are working in rural, remote regions across Canada. We've had a tremendous rapport with mining companies in particular who want to get to a place where they're promoting green minerals and green products in the market. And they take this very seriously because they know that we live in a world today, a world where we know to be competitive, to get the best market value for our products, we've got to have green products. We've got to be able to enter a supply chain that is delivering what the world will be demanding. And that's what we're doing in Canada. I don't expect my colleagues to completely understand the pace at which we're moving towards a clean environment, the way we're launching incentives to ensure that we are a country that is not going to be a follower, but to be a leader in what the world markets are going to need. In fact, Mr. Speaker, in Canada today, we have more mining development and interest in growing the resource economy than we've probably had in a very, very long time. And that is because they see the opportunity to work with a government that is making concrete investments, that has a vision for where we want to go in Canada and in the world in bringing those markets, bringing commodities to those markets, but also because they know it's creating jobs, good jobs in communities. And I think that's critical when you look at the layout of Canada today and the fact that no matter where you live, you should have those opportunities and you should be able to have options for change. And I think as a government, we are certainly giving people that right across the north. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to move that we adjourn debate on the motion that has been put forward, because I know I could spend at least the next 2 hours just talking about the great initiatives that we have launched around alternate energy development and the plan we have to continue to grow that. The Atlantic Accord that we're dealing with today is just a small fraction of that. And the fact that the Conservatives have not been supportive of at all of what the people in Newfoundland and Labrador and the people in Nova Scotia is wanting to do is absolutely shameful. They talk about creating a new economy, and when those provinces are willing to step up to do just that, they launch ways to put impediments and challenges in their path so they can't achieve their vision and their goals that they have for their provinces. So I'd just like to say, Mr. Speaker, that
point of order.
And adjourn.
Hold one sec. I have a point of order from Mr. Small.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find it extremely rich to hear these comments from my colleague from Labrador, given the fact that she advocates for bottom trawling for northern cod. Bottom trawling releases enormous amounts of carbon. It's been proven.
Mr. Small, I'm going to ask you to hold. I'm going to ask you to hold. I'm going to go to Mr. Angus on a point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Angus.
Is she asking to adjourn debate? Because if she is, then there's no debate about that. So
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to go to you, Mr. Patzer, on a point of order on what's your point of order on Mr. Angus's point of order?
Yeah, my point of order is on Mr. Angus's point of order. Ms. Jones obviously did not say that. So Mr. Small was just merely wanting to defend the fact that Conservatives are being gaslit in this point, because the whole entire point of the debate on this bill has been to do what's right by the provinces.
Mr. Patzer, I'll ask everybody to hold. I've heard all the point of orders. Ms. Jones did ask for adjournment, but she was finishing up, and then a point of order was called by Mr. Small. Procedurally, I did not hear anything from you, Mr. Small. You were debating on your, and I've heard further debate as well. So Ms. Jones did have the floor. She was wrapping up her debate. She did ask for a motion to adjourn. And I think she was just about to reference that again until there was a point of order. So is it a procedural issue, Mr. Falk, or is it debate?
It is.
So I'm going to ask you to procedurally be succinct, and then so we can proceed.
Very succinct. You had indicated, Mr. Chair, that Ms. Jones had asked to adjourn the debate, but then you allowed her to continue to debate. So she hadn't technically asked to adjourn the debate yet. She said she was going to ask to adjourn the debate, and then she kept debating. So she hasn't completely asked the question of adjourning the debate. She indicated she was going to, but she kept on talking. So she hasn't asked for it.
So thank you, Mr.
So
Falk.
that's
Your
why we're
point of
still
order.
debating.
Thank you. I appreciate that, that you're providing extra clarification on what's happening today at committee. Ms. Jones, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was cluing out my comments, as you know, and I do adjourn debate on the motion.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldig? Yes. Mr. Bruson?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
We.
Mr. Barra?
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen?
No.
Mr. Falk?
No.
Mr. Patzer?
No.
Ms. Stubbs?
No.
Mrs. Simard?
Oui.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
Debate is adjourned. We'll now go to Clause 220, G24. Mr. Bruson.
This is again one of the amendments for consistency and dealing within 4 states, and I propose that we support it.
Any further debate? No further debate. Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldig?
Yes.
Mr. Bruson?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
We.
Mr. Sabara?
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen?
No.
Mr. Falk?
No.
Mr. Patzer?
No.
Ms. Stubbs?
Nay.
Mrs. Simard?
No.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
G24 carries. Shall Clause 220 carry as amended? Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldig?
Yes.
Mr. Bruson?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
We.
Mr. Sabara?
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen? Mr. Falk?
No.
Mr. Patzer?
No.
Ms. Stubbs?
No.
Mrs. Simard?
No.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
Clause 220 carries as amended. We'll now go to Clause 221, new G25. Mr. Bruson.
I will not be moving this one.
You will not be. Okay. So we will then move to Clause 221. Shall Clause 221 carry? Yes. Please call the roll.
Mr. Eldig?
Yes.
Mr. Bruson?
Yep, point of order, Mr. Chair. I'm just confused because you jumped to it, but there's already an amendment that I was trying to figure out. There's G25.1 that has not been called. That's why I'm sorry. That's why I'm having a moment. I withdrew 25, but there's a 25.1.
G25, she said she's not moving because there's a new one, 25. It doesn't show on this sheet.
We'll suspend for a moment. Colleagues, there was an error in Mr. Brewson's. She would like to move that, but is there consent to allow Mr. Brewson to move her amendment? There was an error in her package, I believe, and what she thought of what the clause was and what it wasn't. So I'm just asking
point of order,
colleagues. And I'll go to you. Go ahead, Mr. Patzer.
Thanks, Chair. I do believe it'd be helpful if Mr. Brewson explained the point of like what happened and what is now happening and going on here, right? I think she can ask for unanimous consent through you, not you doing it for her.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Patzer. Mr. Brewson, I will turn it over to you.
In short, the former G25, which was the one that I had sought to withdraw, was missing a word in it. There had been new wording, which was what I had as a 25.1, but appears as new G25 that includes that one word. So it's a one-word discrepancy between the two, with the thought that in withdrawing it, I was allowing the space for the new one to be moved, G25.1, but instead, in the package as a discrepancy, it's called new G25. If that's clear as mud, basically, one had the word not, one didn't have the word not, it needs the word not, and there is just a discrepancy between which one has it. So I'm seeking consent to then move the new G25, or what I had as G25.1, which has the word not.
Thank you, Mr. Brewson. I'll go to you, Mr. Dreeshen.
Going back to what you had indicated earlier, Mr. Chair, you had said that if there are any sub-amendments, and whether or not it's a one-word situation or not, but if there's any sub-amendments, that they have to be in writing, so that we would have to see that, and of course we would need to have this in both official languages. So are you prepared in a situation like this to allow for sub-amendments to be presented on a motion, on an amendment that comes from the floor, because technically it is coming from the floor?
So just to clarify, thank you, Mr. Dreeshen, for asking for clarification on that. No, the rules still stand and apply as they were stated earlier. What Mr. Brewson, I think, stated was that she had an error on her amendment, and she just was written in the package as new G25, and she had it as G25.1. So she's not moving a sub-amendment, she's moving an amendment. And what she asked for was for consent to be able to just move her amendment that was presented in the package.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Chair, that wasn't, I wasn't suggesting that she was doing a sub-amendment. I was trying to get clarification based on what you had said earlier in the day, that if there was to be a sub-amendment to an amendment, that it had to be in writing. And it makes it very difficult for anyone, whether it be this amendment or not, to be able to come up with a sub-amendment when it is presented in this fashion. So I just want to know if there happened to be another amendment that came up, whether or not we would be restricted as far as applying a sub-amendment based on what you had said earlier.
What I said earlier stands. This was an amendment that was put in writing, which is here. There was I believe what Mr. Brewson said, there was a miscommunication with the numbering of this. The amendment is the same. Her numbering and the numbering that it was presented at was different, so she misinterpreted, and I don't want to speak on Mr. Brewson's on her behalf, but I hope that clarifies what her intent was. She does want to move the amendment that was provided. It's not a new amendment. Okay. It's not a sub-amendment. It's the same amendment. She just had an error that she overlooked on the numbering of it. That's what it was. So it was a technical issue on her end. But once again, sorry, Mr. Brewson, I think that's what your intent was, and I hope that clarifies things. Go ahead, Mr. Patzer.
Yeah, so what I heard Mr. Brewson say was actually that there was a word not included in the original package that was sent out, that she was wanting to either have it removed or have it added. That's where I think part of the uncertainty comes from, and that's why Mr. Dreeshen is saying it would actually be a sub-amendment to the amendment that was given to us here, okay? Because it's changing a word in it. Because you had mentioned that 50, you had a 25.1, but it was a difference of a word that was or wasn't in there, right? So now, if you're seeking unanimous consent to be able to move the amendment, I mean, I'm sure we'd be fine to have you do that, because you said you weren't going to move it. I think we'd be fine to have you move that amendment. But if there's a wording difference, then I would like to see that, because I don't have it if it's a wording difference. But if it's just a numbering thing that was the confusion, that's all it was. It's just that I heard you say that the word "not" was, but maybe that was something else. So I'll let you. But Mr.
Thank you.
Bruson has.
I'm going to go to you next, Mr. Bruson, so you can clarify everything that's said so our colleagues clearly know what your intent was and what's going on.
Yeah. So what you have is new G25, which I had numbered as 25.1. It's the same. The difference is that when we put in the new one, I have a different numbering in mine, but the wording you have is the one that I want to move. It's just called new G25 in your package, and it's 25.1 in mine.
Okay. Well, why don't we kick off next meeting with this right here?
What's that? I don't know what that is.
The amendment that she's seeking.
Oh,
to move.
well.
That'd be a great way to start our next meeting, Mr. Chair.
Can we get consent, though, before we get
Yes.
to that?
Yeah, okay, so we have, can we just, I'm sure you want to further debate, and so we'll move at, I
No,
think.
we consent to her moving
Okay,
the
clear.
amendment at the start of the next meeting.
Sure, and so Mr. Bruson, as we start the next meeting, you will be able to present your new amendment, new G2025, and colleagues, I think what we're saying is, this is a point to end in today's meeting. Thank you so much for your hard work today and being collaborative, working together, and getting a lot accomplished. So thank you, and we'll see you on Thursday. Meeting adjourned.